I'd like to thank you all for coming. My name is Paul Soley. I'm the current Chief Technology Officer. I'm also an alum, class of 1988. So to all you seniors out there, it's not much longer, just hang in there. I'm a current parent. Some of you may know me as Richard's dad. But I was a swim coach here, started off doing that. And I also taught in the classroom, but have been in the technology department for over 20 years now. So with the BYOD program kicking off in the upper school next year at Bolles, our goal is to expand our opportunities for you, our students, our teachers, and the overall learning environment here at Bolles. Mr. Fish has traveled from Washington, D.C. to be with us. We welcome him as our peak prospective speaker today. Tim Fish was appointed as the first Chief Innovation Officer at NAIS on July 1st. He has deep roots in the independent school community and a long history at McDonough School in Maryland. Mr. Fish was also the founding president and CEO of the Folio Collaborative, a nonprofit community of more than 125 schools around the world focused on working together to build a flexible faculty-staff development process that is grounded in strong relationships and meaningful conversations. Tim is the co-author of the book Leadership and Technology at Independent Schools. He started his career off as a fourth grade teacher and has served as a founder, board member, and consultant for a variety of educational and technology-related schools, organizations, and companies. Tim Fish has an undergraduate degree from St. Francis University and a master's from George Mason University. He is also the father of 4 children, ranging in age from 21 to 12. Please welcome Mr. Tim Fish.
Thanks, everyone. I am very, very excited to be here and to spend about 20 minutes with you talking about the future. So that's kind of a big challenge, right? Tell a bunch of juniors and seniors everything they need to know about their futures, and you got 20 minutes to do it. And so what I'd like to do is use 2 minutes of my 20 to have you think for just a second about 2025. Not that far away, but kind of over the hill. My gut is that things are going to look different in 2025. So what I'd like you to do is talk to a neighbor, think about one thing that you think is going to be different in 2025. What's that? We'll all turn into dust. Oh, man. Like, all right, I'm not going down that road, so. Yes. Global warming, right? Yes. Definitely a trend that can be out there. Any others? Yes. What's that? Driverless commercial vehicle? Yeah, the autonomous vehicle, I think there's a really good chance. Yes.
We'll have people on Mars.
You think so?
Yeah.
Wow,
All right, so maybe people on Mars?
NASA.
If not, we'll be close. So here's the thing. As I think about the future, I speak at schools and associations and organizations all over the country and all over the world. And you are the ones that I would love to speak with more than anyone. Because as I look out, it's your future. This is yours to inherit. This is your time. The world, I think, is going to be really powerful. And I think there are really many trends. We could spend a few hours talking about what's really going to happen over the next several years. But there are a couple that I want to just pull to your attention. A couple that have blown my mind in the last year or so. The first one is around the idea of currency. How many of you know what Bitcoin is? Right? So wow, like a lot of you have heard of Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin got started around 2008, 2009, Bitcoin essentially is a global currency. If you've never heard of Bitcoin, Bitcoin takes the idea of the dollar or the pound or the yuan from China and sort of just democratizes that. Says that what if we just had one currency that traveled around the world? And so Bitcoin also changes the whole notion of who is the gatekeeper. It uses something called blockchain. And blockchain basically is a new way of accounting and a new way of saying who has money and who doesn't. And essentially, without getting too much into it, it's kind of unhackable because it's distributed across the world. It doesn't just live in one place. The chain lives across the world. So what that does is it fundamentally changes how money moves. It allows you to break up. Right now we have a dollar that breaks up into a penny. And a penny is about the smallest thing we have. What would happen to currency in the economy if you could do transactions that were 1/100,000th of a penny? Right? So why would you do that? Well, imagine if YouTube was structured on a financial model that every time you watch a movie or you watch a video, you're charged 1/10,000th of a penny. Right? Which is nothing if you added up how many videos you watch. But we just hit a wall in the world where every day there are over 1 billion hours of YouTube videos watched across the world. Every day, there are more than 1 billion hours of YouTube videos watched across the world. So imagine microcurrency where you're now being paid a very small amount, but if you get 150 million views of your video, that actually starts to add up, right? Things start to really change with currency. When Bitcoin got started, of course, it had no value because nobody knew what it was. So it would cost 10,000 coin, right? These coin concept, 10,000 coin to buy a pizza in 2008. Now Bitcoin has been gaining more popularity, more notoriety, more people accept it and value it. Now one coin costs, the other day I just looked at it flying home from LA, I was doing some research, $1,299 US for one coin. So Bitcoin is almost like digital gold, right? Because pretty soon they're going to stop producing coin, and so its value is going to just keep going up and up and up. So currency, the way that we transact business, what we mean by money, and how also blockchain is going to change the way we think about transactions, contracts, all kinds of things. Huge, huge, game-changing kind of event. And right now you might be going, huh? But it's kind of like we're sitting in 1994. If I were sitting here and I'd say, there's this thing called the internet. And you'd all be like, what? What's he talking about? My sense is maybe not quite the same, but blockchain and cryptocurrency, it's called, is going to be a major game changer in our world. The second one for me is robotics and automation. There was a report that was just done by Oxford University about a year ago that basically looked across the industry in the US and said that 40% by 2025, 40% of the jobs in the US will be automated. So just to put that in context, during the Great Depression, right, the unemployment rate was about 25%. So now you take 40% of the jobs that people do, and they're being done by machines. Truck drivers, huge one, as someone just said, right? Gone. Imagine 2025, you're riding down the road, there's nobody driving the trucks. They're going past you, right? Well, nobody, meaning there's no human driving the truck. There's a huge neural network of computers that are driving the truck, right? Imagine if airlines actually are flown like drones, right? Like, that's a freaky concept, right? You get on the plane and there's nobody up front, right? But this concept is actually not stuff that, it's not science fiction that people are talking about. It really is a potential game changer. Robotics is the same thing. The notion of what a robot will do. Right now when I think of a robot, I think of an auto manufacturing facility. And I think of those huge kind of arms that are going up and kind of moving around. 2 weeks ago I was in the Science Center in Pittsburgh, and there was a robot that was playing air hockey, right, that they had in the Science Center. I stood there for about 35 minutes. I never saw anyone score a goal against the robot, right? So you know air hockey, right? So you have a person on one end of the table, a robotic arm on the other end of the table. People are slamming the puck super fast, and that robot's arm is just going zit, 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 zit. So it's tracking the puck, moving at an incredibly high speed and stopping people from scoring a goal. Like, that's kind of silly. But imagine what happens when that kind of robotics happens. Or you just have a robotic agent in your house. You might want to look on YouTube. There's this thing called Jibo. Anyone ever seen the YouTube video on Jibo? It's J-I-B-O. It's this robot like in your house that you sort of walk in, and it has this like kind of rotates to you, and it's like, good morning, right? It's like Alexa, sort of the Amazon Echo, sort of married with something that can device. So you can say like, Jibo, take a picture of us, and it'll spin around and sort of take a picture. It'll kind of follow you around and look at things. It'll bring things up on the screen that you want to see. So it's the next version of where Amazon Echo is going. This sort of interactive devices that are in your life all the time. Artificial intelligence, if robotics and automation was funky, artificial intelligence, I think, is going to be another major game changer. So artificial intelligence right now is in our lives in a lot of ways. The best way for me to think about it is a driverless car. I was in Austin, Texas a few weeks ago, and I went out for a morning run, and 2 of the Google cars drove past me. Anyone ever see one of those Google cars, right? The little tiny things, the woo, woo, woo. Then I was in Pittsburgh the other day, like I was saying, and the Volvo, Uber driverless Volvo drove past me, right? Now there was, in both of those cases, there was an engineer sitting physically in the car, I guess with his or her foot on the brake, in case something went wrong. But really, they're not doing anything sitting in the car. The car is driving itself. So artificial intelligence is that idea that nothing's programmed, right? It's been written so that it learns. It learns on the road. It figures out its environment, constantly diagnosing and learning what it should do and making decisions. The question, though, is the ethics, right? Driverless cars coming down the road. 2 things are coming at it at one time. It's got to have an accident. Someone's going to get hurt. What does it do? What choice does it make, right? That's a really interesting question, ethically, for us to think about. But driverless cars are about the idea that it's not just writing computer code to execute something. It's thinking machines. Right now, a huge percentage of the stock market trades that happen every day, over 1 billion shares are traded every day on the New York Stock Exchange. The vast majority of those trades, the moment of execution of when to buy and sell, it's not being made by a human anymore. The old days of saying, buy 50 shares or whatever, those days are gone. It's microseconds, and even microseconds of trading done by incredibly smart algorithms that are deciding when to execute trades. The challenge of artificial intelligence, though, is not so much just when we have things that come into our world and execute on things we know about, things we can think about, like driverless cars, stock trades, etc. But more, it's around this notion of awareness. What some people talk about is a concept called singularity. There's a guy from MIT named Ray Kurzweil who wrote a book called Singularity. And the concept, right, long, thick book I read in graduate school, but the concept around singularity is when does technology gain what he called awareness? And so what this graph shows is all through human history, the human intellect has been increasing. We've been getting smarter and smarter and smarter. I can tell you, you are all vastly smarter than I was when I was, sitting as a junior or senior in high school. I didn't know anything compared to what you know and what you're able to do. So it's increasing, and what we see is machine intelligence, starting around 1950, started increasing as well. And the predictions from Kurzweil and some others is around 2030, things really began to change. And what Kurzweil says is that in 2030, the intersection of artificial intelligence with dramatically more computer power than we ever could think about today, those two things hit each other. And what results is true thinking machines. Think machines that gain what he calls consciousness. Now that gets really wacky. And the line that always stuck with me after that is that when that happens, it fundamentally redefines what it means to be human. And then you go like, what? So what does this all mean for you? In my mind, what this means for you is you need to be the CEO of your own brand. You need to figure out what it is that you want to do and what value you bring. The idea that you're just going to have one job, you're going to do one thing for your whole life, that's probably not true. You're probably going to have 10, 12, 20 different jobs in your career. So what would those jobs be? What thing do you do that's really interesting? What do you do that can't be automated? What value do you bring to the table? As I think about what kinds of values and things you should bring, a couple ideas come to mind for me. One is integrity and honor. At schools like this, you're learning the value of being an incredibly thoughtful, kind individual. Hard work and initiative. Just show up and work hard. By the way, this is the list I give to my own children. 2 are in college and 1 is a sophomore. They don't actually listen to it that much, so I'm hoping maybe you will. The other is unique skills that are deep. What are you really good at? A couple weeks ago I was in LA, and I was meeting with some students, and there was a student who had gotten incredibly good at color correction in Final Cut Pro and the Adobe suite around video. He was amazing at that, to the point at which now film companies in LA wanted to hire him, right? He got really, really good at color correction, a very niche skill, but one where there's a lot of value in it. Energy and ideas. What do you want to speak up about? What are you passionate about? What ideas engage you? And then balance. I think one of the things for me that we don't do enough is balance. Is taking the time to reflect, to think about the world, to think about who we are, to really ask ourselves those questions. We're all so incredibly busy. In a few minutes, I'm going to jump in an Uber, start heading to the airport, and what am I probably going to do even before I get off the ground is probably pull up my phone and start checking email, right? Like, I say this because this is the one I really suffer from. I really stink at balance. I really stink at sort of taking the time to reflect and be mindful. A good friend of mine always calls me and texts me and says, you need to just go lay on the floor, right? Just lay on the floor and be mindful, and just be thoughtful and be conscious. So I offer that to you as well. So those are some very quick reflections that I offer to you. Probably you might be going like, what was that? Like, what was that thinking? But my point to you is this, that the world is going to change in some really interesting and phenomenal ways. You all have the opportunity to seize it. And you have the opportunity to create the kind of world that we all want to live in. And you will be the influencers. You will be the leaders. And so the question for me is, what are you going to do with that voice? What are you going to do with that opportunity? And how are you going to help us to have a phenomenal world that we all live into? So go get them. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. Yes. Andrew, right? Was it Andrew? No. Alexander, I was close.
With the future of artificial intelligence, do you think the fears that artificial intelligence will surpass humanity? Do you think there's a credible threat to our existence with it?
It's a really good question. I don't know the answer, but I worry about it, right? I worry that we will get to a place where there will be this, like, what does it mean? There's a lot of folks who have said that what's actually going to happen is that we're going to be blending human intelligence and what humans bring with very high power intelligence from machines. And we're going to get to this great place where the two work wonderfully together and allow us to all be smarter and more powerful. And I'm like, I sure hope that's the way it goes. But I don't know sometimes, right? Like, the kind of power that's out there is going to be really significant. And I just hope it's really used for really powerful, good purposes. If anyone's ever, what's the thing on Netflix called like Broken Mirror or Black Mirror? Like, yeah, you guys, you've seen it, right? Some of that stuff freaks me out, right? So if you've never seen like the Black Mirror episodes, like there's definitely some stuff that is like, what is going on? Any other questions? Anyone? Yes. It's a great question. So technically, could Bitcoin start replacing currencies around the world? I think probably it could. Will it? That's a question that's probably beyond me, but what I'm seeing is there's mass adoption of those things. So, for example, in Argentina right now, there's all these political barriers to Uber moving into Argentina. So Uber uses Bitcoin as its currency transition for doing business in Argentina. Because using traditional currency was too problematic, so like forget that. We'll just get it out of the way, let's go with this. So I think that it is going to break down national barriers and currency barriers right now that are awkward, right? So I could imagine that possibly happening. Yes? It's a great question. Well, the Bitcoin faced the same problems that the euro has, right? Economists could probably answer that question far better than I could. But my sense is that it probably will face new challenges that we probably haven't thought of yet, and maybe some of the same ones that the euro has. But I think this notion of nationalized currency might actually change things in a more dramatic way than we've thought about. That's a great question. When do we start seeing governments use true database analysis to make smarter decisions, right? I'm surprised. My brother-in-law works for Social Security Administration, and their data systems are like so far back in time, you can't even begin to imagine. They still are, a lot of them are on this green screen, right? Which is like the old like DOS, like pre-internet stuff. So I think there's a long time before governments are really using that kind of data in some ways, but I think they're already in other places beginning to do that today. One thing you might want to look at, I think is fascinating, is a software product called Tableau. Tableau is a data visualization tool that is incredibly powerful. And Tableau, there's something called Tableau Public that is free to use, and you can throw any data source at it, like an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Sheet. And so if you're really interested in like visualizations of data, I would encourage you, go play with Tableau, get really good at using Tableau, and like, trust me, there's a lot of jobs for people that are very good at visualizations of data. But Tableau Public Tableau used to be really expensive, and now it's just like free to use on the internet. So I'd play with some of that stuff. I think we're probably out of time, but this has been, thank you all for spending a few minutes of your time.